Welcome back in a real way. Let's talk about decision making, right? Um, by now, many of y'all have probably heard the phrase, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And there's something valid to that. A lot of times we jump into situations haphazardly or half-assedly, either based on our emotions or trying to swing move, get something for nothing, and the shit doesn't go favorably. Okay? Coming from where we come from, most of our situations aren't necessarily favorable. So we always have to do a certain amount of improvising in order to make I can't even say make it better, but to kind of break even at least. You know what I'm saying? So with that said, I want to be clear that people know that, like, when you are making do with a circumstance, even if you can finagle it into a favorable result, that doesn't equal the return on an investment, or nor does it equal a good initial decision. Does that make sense? Like, we've heard when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. Okay, cool. Lemonade in that context is making do with what you have ultimately. You know what I'm saying? Trying to make the best out of what you have. Lemons is sour, like that. Like, that's the situation. You're trying to make the best out of a sour situation. That's what the cliche means. Make the best out of a sour situation. The best out of a sour situation doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end up with a favorable result, and nor does that result, regardless of what it is, negate the fact of making a good initial decision. So always try to make the best decision first. Always try to have the best plan first. And that way it will set you up for the best result. You don't want to make a dumbass decision and then have to settle for lemonade in the end. You understand? Do your thinking first, and you might have to do less thinking later. Also, it like, because there's no way to stop life from life, and so we're constantly going to be thrown different variables and situations anyway. So even with the plan, even with having the blueprint and the plan ahead of time, there's no way to really factor in for everything that could possibly take place. However, at least you have the advantage of knowing where you're starting from, what you have resource wise, and what your end goal is. When you're making a dumb decision, you don't even have those things. Those things put you in a certain advantage because you know what you can afford, you know what time frame you're looking at, and you know what you have an idea of what the progress looks like. When you're making a dumb decision or a rash decision, you don't have any of these check marks. You don't know when you're really progressing or anything until it's all said and done. That's when you know you either took a loss, broke even, or maybe got a little bit more than you initially expected. Also, when you are making dumb decisions, there's no way to factor in the loss of time, the loss of resources, and possibly the loss of people that you might incur along the way of making a dumb decision. So it's always better to plan ahead of time. with that said, always seek knowledge. Always try to learn as much about a situation as possible before you set it into play, because that's going to aid in your planning. Like I said, do all your thinking on the front part, so that you don't have to do the improvising later on, because improvising is a measure of desperation in all actuality. You know what I'm saying? Improvising means whatever you set out to do initially didn't really happen. You know what I'm saying? Now, don't get me wrong. It's better to improvise when you have a plan, because you already know how to steer things back into course, as opposed to improvising on the fly. You end up taking whatever comes your way, or settling for, maybe cutting your losses and things of that nature. You understand? That was just something that I wanted to share, man. Making do with circumstances that may or may not end in favorable results don't necessarily equal a return on investment, nor does it negate the fact of having a good initial decision in the first place, or a good plan in the first place. And don't let motherfuckers convince you otherwise. Period. Now, don't get me wrong, doing nothing doesn't feel good. The only thing that feels good about doing nothing is doing something. So I understand the concept of how people can get lost in thinking movement is progress, which it's not. However, if you start off with a plan, it's more probable that your movement will be progressive, as opposed to you just staying active but not actually creating positive action. And that's it. Love y'all. Peace.